City of Fort Lauderdale Historic Preservation Board meeting to order. I believe we have a quorum. We first start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pardon? So we'll do a roll call. Sorry, I missed that earlier.
Mr. Bray,
Here.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Rosa,
Here.
Mr. Shalom,
Here.
Ms. Walker. Here. And Chair Marcus.
Oh, here.
You have a quorum.
Okay. So I think we've all received the draft minutes for May 1st meeting. Does anyone have any comments or questions on it? Okay.
Just again,
Richard?
some brief changes or notations. Page 4, paragraph 5. I believe I also stated that the police station was designed by Bigling. The architect was not seen as a factor for determining its historic designation. On page 8, paragraph 6. I'm not sure what the property I referred to at the meeting, but it looked like it was 301 South 14th Way, not Avenue, because that would be a PUD property and not relevant as a topic of conversation, because Way was the property in question last month. Pointing inside.
Okay. Thank you. And Tricia, you had mentioned we need to do elections first. Is it the time to do it?
Yeah, but you can
Still
still
need a
vote
motion
for
for the
minutes
minutes.
versus right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
With Richard's changes, we're gonna vote to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
it would
Make a
have to be
motion to
Oh,
approve
so
the
you-
minutes as amended. Second.
All in favor. Okay, great. Thank you. And seconded. Tricia, you wanted to conduct the elections again?
Typically the chair does, I think.
Oh,
But just to ask for nominations for
okay,
vice chair and the chair. And you can do it one at a time.
okay. So we'll first ask for nominations for the chair.
But didn't we do this?
Yeah, we did. Why do
We
you have
did
to
do
do
it
it
a couple
again?
months ago when we had some changes to the board and Chair Mark, or the previous chair was
Or to recuse himself or
Yeah.
remove himself from.
removed because of attendance, so.
Right.
Yeah.
So what,
Just for the remainder.
refresh my memory, what did we do so we could do it again?
Re-elect the
So,
chair and
you
the
make
vice
a
chair.
motion. Yeah, you can take nominations, you can have a discussion amongst the board and then make a motion to nominate a chairperson.
I still don't understand why we have to do this again.
It's
but-
because our
It's a
code
requirement.
requires. it.
Because,
Oh, every June, I'm sorry.
because it was just for the remainder of the term of,
Oh,
That explains it very well. Okay.
okay, so do we do chair first and then vice chair?
either one, it's up to you. You should be chair.
I'll make a motion that we continue with the existing chair and vice chair as they are.
Brilliant.
Is there a
Second.
second? Second. All in favor?
Okay, let's just clarify who they are so that she
No.
can write it for the minutes. No, other people may not know.
Okay. Arthur Marcus for chair and Richard Rosa for vice chair. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations again.
Trying to make it simple as this.
Okay,
Hold on.
And chair, we could start with the second item for the request for deferral.
right, okay, I'm sorry, yes. There's been a request to begin with the second item because they're asking for a continuance, a deferral, I'm sorry. And this is case UDP HP 23020 for a certificate of appropriateness for demolition of a one-story single-family residence identified as a contributing property to the Sailboat Bend Historic District. Tricia.
We have a representative here from the application to make the request.
You don't have to read the whole thing.
No,
No, okay.
Would you like me to stand as like?
just at the podium, that's fine.
Okay. Hi, I'm Roy Edwards. I'm with Toothaker, and I'm representing the property owner, respectfully requesting a deferral of the case until the August 7th Historic Preservation Board meeting. Just a couple of reasons is, of course, the applicant's attorney, Stephanie Toothaker, is not present today. We're working with the design consultants on the new construction of the home, since now we're requesting the demolition. And then we're also going to be very likely amending the application and resubmitting before the August 7th date. So you're just asking for a deferral today.
I have a question. You had mentioned that in the deferral, part of it was that you're redesigning the home or homes to go on the site.
Yeah.
But this is only a certificate of appropriateness for demolition. Would it have anything to do
So we
with
had-
new construction? I'm
They're,
sorry.
they're requesting to defer the application so that they can amend the submittal to include the new construction.
Oh, so they want to include the new construction as part of the site plan.
Correct, they would be requesting the demolition and the new construction at the same time.
Don't we usually do demolition first?
Yes, you would have to
We'd
consider
have to do
both.
that, okay.
Yeah, you do have to consider both.
So then they would amend it to be certificate of appropriateness for demolition and construction.
And then a certificate of appropriateness for new construction.
So there'll be two separate items.
Two separate motions would
Okay.
need to be considered.
All right, so we have a.
Can I say,
I'm sorry,
am I
yeah.
allowed to? Can I go up there?
Well, this is administrative things.
Are we allowed to have public comment?
It is up to you if you'd like to entertain public comments. It's
Sure.
up to you. We don't have to.
You have to go up to the podium though.
All right.
And just state your name for the
Sure.
record, please. Can you hear us down here?
My name is Ted and Sarah. I just want to say I was here for this one item right here. And I took 3 buses and had to pay a UPS driver $20 because I was on the wrong side of the airport to get over to here. So I'm very upset that this was occurred.
What did you want to say while you're here?
Well, what I mostly want to see, because Sailboat Inn is sacred to me, what I wanted to see, I understand if the demolition has to go through. I was more curious and to see what design that they are gonna have to rebuild, if it fits in with the neighborhood, or if it's gonna be just another one of those sugar cube looking white things with a black door in the middle and a carport on the right side. Just like you're seeing all over the city right now, like it's their only design they're allowed to build anymore, but that's what I was more concerned about, was what the new design is going to look like. So I guess I'll get
Hopefully
back
you'll
on
be-
3 buses, at least I'll save $20, because I'm already on this side of the airport.
Okay, well, hopefully you'll be able to come back when they,
Oh, I will.
okay,
Ted,
thank you.
I'll take you home.
Oh,
I'm going the same way you need to go.
oh, very good, thanks.
There you go.
I love this city.
So,
Are there any,
yeah, I have.
did you want to say something?
Go ahead and let the young ladies.
Well, let's, no, you're the public, so we should have you speak first.
Thank you. You're Marcus.
Marcus,
Yes.
that's okay.
Okay, so, my name's Michaela Concom, Broward Trust for Historic
Can you
Preservation.
speak into the microphone?
Yeah.
Oh, there is no microphone.
Microphone.
Okay,
Yeah, my name's Michaela Conga. I'm with Broward Trust for Historic Preservation. I have 2 concerns. And one is the fact that the original house is a contributing structure to the historic district of Sailboat Bend. And lovely concept of the original drawing that I saw. Don't know that it fits quite in with the historic district. Would love to see them somehow work with the original historic house and come up with something that is more in keeping with the community. Interestingly enough, today I pulled up the Florida Master Site file. Unfortunately, this, even though it is a contributing structure, it is not, it doesn't have its own master site file. But what I did discover, and I found this kind of ironic, I want to share it quickly, and I thought I was going to be doing this more for the good of the order, but this might be more timely for, hope it's not eating too much into you guys, but what I found quite interesting is, I'm going to pass this around. The bottom right-hand picture is the house, which is the original house.
Yeah.
And according to the state, we're gonna get a master site file done on this house. Don't know if it'll be done in time. And we're gonna update the master site file for the historic bend as well. And if there's a way to work with the owners, because I understand they want to stay in Sailboat Bend, and find a way to let them have their new larger home, but somehow work with that original structure, that would be the ideal situation. Do not want to see another demolition in Sailboat Bend. Just don't want to see it.
Just to add to what you're saying, it's ironic you say that because the second item on our agenda, which was originally the first item, is for the demolition, for the moving of a structure on the same property to allow for new construction. So I'm just mentioning. that.
On this property?
No, not this one.
Oh, we're talking about Bigginy?
It's another applicant.
No, you're not.
It's not
You're
Bigginy.
talking about.
No, no.
Okay.
Totally different.
Oh, okay. The first item on the agenda is a relocation of a
That's
house,
the one I'm talking about.
so that they can build a new house on the property, but save the
Well, they're
existing
building
house.
townhouses, but even so, and they're saving both structures on the property.
Where are they moving them?
So the elsewhere, anyway, we have to get moving.
Yeah, okay, that's good. I'm
But,
glad I'm here for that too.
I would suggest
Um,
both of these individuals stay for further discussion as it might be of interest to you later.
Yes,
Sure.
okay,
I'll
so
check.
I just I appeal to you guys, ladies and gentlemen, to really consider a way to work with the owners and the architect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As
Thank you for
Mr.
your
Bray
time.
just mentioned, you may want to stay for this next item.
I do, I have a 7 o'clock board meeting.
Oh, wait.
It's time.
Okay,
With the-
good.
with the trust, so, yes, I will
All
stay
right,
as long as I
thank you.
can.
I don't know if we're entertaining other comments about this or.
Not from the
feedback.
board, I know. And then, because once we start,
Yep.
it's okay. I'm sorry, please. Continue.
I appreciate all the comments, and I think it's a good thing now we're deferring, gives us a little bit more time to work with the community and come up with a better design, and kind of salvage as much as we can from the existing structure. That's kind of the point also of why we wanted to amend the application. Let's go this to a later date, so
Okay,
that's why I'm requesting.
so does anyone have a motion?
Just remember to tell us what sheet you're deferring it to.
What date are you deferring to?
August 7th.
A request.
August 7th? I'd like to make a motion.
Because I believe this is an administrative approval, I would make a motion to postpone this application to the August 17th.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You also may want to stay and listen to the next item.
It's the moving of the structure.
Yeah. Do we have an applicant for that? Okay,
I do have to run, but I know it's recorded, so
Okay.
I'm gonna listen a little bit later.
so we have item number 1, which is now item number 2, UDP HP 23020 at 930 Tequesta Street. And I will let Tricia speak further on this.
Well, this is actually case number UDP HP 23021.
Oh,
And it's the first item on the agenda.
I read
It's
it wrong.
located at 11 Southwest 11th Avenue.
Sorry, can we just do the solutions
For this, not yet. I was going to do it after.
after her present?
Should we do it now? Any disclosures? Let's go around with the room. None? No disclosure?
I did a site visit, drove by.
Site visit.
I've been by many times, I know the property, but I am not any other connections to the property. And I did a site visit.
Okay.
So this property is located in the Sailboat Bend Historic District. There are two existing structures on the site. They were both renovated several years ago in their original style, in the frame vernacular style, and were updated. One structure on the site is a single family home, and the other structure is an accessory dwelling unit. And there is, I think it's used as a studio, but the applicant is here and can get much more into detail about that. The main house on the site would stay in its current location. It's in the northeast corner of the property. And then the accessory structure is what's proposed to move from the southwest corner to the northwest corner of the property. And that opens up space on the lot. It's a large lot where the property owner has mentioned an interest in developing that portion, but we have not reviewed that proposal and its any requirements with the ULDR. So that is forthcoming. That would be later on. So the only thing that would be considered at this time is the move of the structure, that's the accessory structure on the site, to the other location on the same site. And the application does primarily meet most of the criterion. The only criterion that it doesn't totally meet is the contribution the building or structure makes to its present setting. The structure is a one-story vernacular residence constructed in 1925. And as I mentioned, the structure is currently situated in the southwest corner of the lot and visible from both frontages. The structure will be relocated to that northwest corner, and there won't be as much visibility as there is today. So that's the only consideration where staff found that it didn't completely meet the criterion. So with that, in conclusion, in accordance with section 47-2411 B3CI and 47-2411 B3C IV of the ULDR, staff finds that the application for a certificate of appropriateness for relocation under case number UDP-HP 23021 located at 11 Southwest 11th Avenue meets the criteria outlined in section 47-2411 B3CI and partially meets the criteria in section 47-2411 B3CIB. And if the board does make a motion for approval, then there is one condition that staff has proposed, which is this application is subject to the approval by building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements, including chapter 9, article 9, house moving of volume 1 of the code of ordinances, which is something that's mentioned in our code requirements for any relocation application.
Okay, thank you. The applicant?
Yeah, my name is Bernie Patricia. Yeah, some of you know me. I want to thank Patricia. She's done a great job and she's helped me a lot. Basically, we have a large property, 2 units. One is a historic home, the other one is the secondary building, which is a small one. It's only about 540 square feet. We'd like to retain the second building, but move it to the southwest corner of the property, the northwest corner of the property, to make room to put 4 or 5 townhouses, depending on what the state will approve. What she has presented is excellent, which is basically what we're doing, and she's done a great job. So I'd like to thank her for that. And the only item that I'd like, if possible, longer than 6 months to come in with the second project. Giving me up to November 4th, 2023. It's going to be tight to come in with a design for the townhouses. But other than that, please, if you can, I'd like to get the application approved.
Excuse me, I'm not familiar. 6 months?
There's not a requirement. For
I didn't
to
think
come
so.
back.
Okay. So there's no deadline requirement. You can go back whenever you're ready.
Sorry, I didn't get a chance to swear everyone in,
That's right.
so could I do that now?
Of course.
Okay. Anyone who's gonna speak to the board today, can you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
My earth. Please continue. Oh, do you have anything else to add?
That's it.
Thank you.
No.
Oh, please.
Are there any renderings of?
But I think you should wait to open up the public hearing
Okay,
and speak at that point so that.
okay.
Discussion
Well,
among yourself
let's
first.
have the applicant finish. And you are finished. So if the applicant's finished, you can open up
You
the
would-
public
yeah.
hearing. So we're opening up the public hearing.
It's part of the end.
Your turn.
Well, that's, yes, I just was wondering if you guys have any renderings of what he's proposing.
Oh, yeah, we did, it's a preliminary one.
Just to be sure, did you get on record her name and her address?
Yes,
Michaela?
can you just stand at the podium? Thanks.
Anyway, right now, the board only has copies of what the applicant is applying for, which is demolition. We don't.
Relocation.
I'm sorry, relocation, sorry.
Of the existing structure.
That's all we are voting on today. The new design is up to the applicant. Okay,
Okay,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Is there anyone else? to speak? Okay, then we'll close the public forum and open it up to the board. Sorry.
I'm curious, Richard, what do you think about, you know, way more background on relocating buildings and such. How I'm glad to hear that it's a possibility because seems like it's a nice way to keep the building and also give the owner an opportunity to put something new and appropriate, hopefully, on the property. But to
My comment
to
was
me, it
just
sounds
gonna
like a
be-
win-win.
My comment was gonna be that I applaud Bernie for the vision and the plans that he's bringing before HPP. I think it's an excellent plan because it retains a historic structure and the property, considers the needs of the community for additional housing and a residential community, and considers the interest of the owner for improving the value of their asset within the community. I feel this is the type of project consideration that we should be encouraging and supporting HPP. My only question I really had for you was, I wasn't really sure where the secondary structure that you're moving, how it was gonna be accessible by driveway or getting to it since it's moving back from the main street that it's currently accessible from.
Yeah, it's gonna be accessible by the existing drive, well, temporarily until such time as we build a townhouse. The existing driveway is gonna basically, it's gonna serve that one also. But it's not gonna be occupied. We're gonna be using the secondary residence most likely as a pool house or some meeting room, instead of, a residence.
Great,
Thank you.
Richard.
I don't have many comments other than I have the appreciation for the relocation. I think it's awesome that you're doing that. You could easily came in here and ask for something else, but the fact that you brought that forth is fantastic.
I also wanted to congratulate you for having the understanding of the historic district and the foresight to come up with a plan like this, retaining historically sensitive structure into the Seville Bend Historic District. I would only say that I wish more applicants could be convinced to do something like this. We had another application, I believe at the last meeting, where I think it was continued, but he volunteered to look into either donating it to someone else or maintaining it on his property. So I hope that more applicants come in with presentations like this, and I hope the board can look at it as a very favorable opportunity to preserve Seville Bend. You want to say anything?
No, I agree with all the comments here. I think this is just
Okay.
the type of application that we.
Right. With that,
Yeah, Arthur, I just echo what has been said, but I like the way that Tricia has worked with the applicant and the clarity of this package is a really good one. So it was, for me, still acclimating. This made a lot of sense. So thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
With that, we have a motion. He can't make all the motions. Come on,
I can make a motion.
please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve with the conditions. The resolution for a certificate of appropriateness for relocation for lease number UDP HB 23021. Located at 11 Southwest 11th Avenue based on the following findings of fact. Sorry.
You could say in the
And-
staff report if you want.
In this outlined in the staff, based on the facts and findings outlined in the staff memorandum. And to include the condition of the applicant must subject to approval by building zoning and all ULDR. Are requirements, including chapter 9, article 9, for house moving of volume 1 of the code of ordinances. Is subject to the following conditions. Right? I kind of messed that up, didn't I? Sorry.
Yeah, it's subject to.
Is it
the condition
appropriate?
On page 4 of the staff report. Perfect.
Right,
Perfect, sorry.
thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have?
And then bubbled it all up.
No, you did great. Is there a second? Do we have a second? You nailed that. Second, Alan seconds it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Congratulations.
Tricia,
And good luck.
Thank you.
Tricia, I have a question.
Yeah.
That came up while we were just talking about this previous project. I think it is great that you were able to work with this owner to formulate the presentation or guide him in the right way. So I don't know if I'm using the right words.
Uh-huh.
We've had this discussion before. You're not allowed to do that with a design that comes before you. When the new design comes, can you give them the same kind of clarity or
We do
understanding?
provide feedback
You do.
for any application. We're willing to work with any applicant.
My misunderstanding.
Yeah, in some instances, some applicants aren't wanting to talk through the situation more. In Bernie's case, he did come to me at least a year ago to talk through what he would like to do, and we preliminarily reviewed his plans and gave him feedback, and he assembled all of his own things,
Okay.
to be clear, and then submitted the application.
So it sounds like as long as you're willing to help everybody, as long as you don't have to become their architect.
Yeah, I'm not able to design a project.
I understand that.
But I can give feedback, and I always let the applicants know what my feedback would be in a staff report prior to them submitting, if there's an opportunity to do so.
Is it required to have a pre-board meeting with you? If
It's
they-
not a requirement.
I'm just wondering if it shouldn't be.
Yeah, it's not in our ordinance, and I'm not sure if, we can make someone come in for a
It's
pre-application.
commonly done in many other jurisdictions in South Florida. Oh, it's just-
It's part of
We do it
the-
for site.
I understand, okay.
Great idea.
It's not required.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we
It's not
encourage,
required.
we always encourage everyone to come in
Meet with staff.
and meet with staff prior to submitting an application, but we
It's
can't
not required.
require.
Okay,
we encourage them and we tell them that how you alleviate a lot of issues.
or you say
down the
something
road.
like it's highly recommended.
Yeah.
Arthur, if there was a way to get that out to the public. I think we talked about this.
Well, I think
before.
when applications come to Tricia, she's gonna be the point person.
Right, so just how that funnel gets created, here's an example of a best practice, we all like it. And if there was a way that could be communicated more broadly through other means.
Yeah.
It would always be.
I believe it's on our website. We do have a form that people can fill out. If they want a pre-application meeting, they can also contact us directly to set something up. So there are ways to do it, and sometimes when people do submit applications, it will start that conversation naturally, where there has to be back and forth to even complete an application to schedule it for a board meeting.
Thank you for the clarification. So now we're up to, I don't think we have any communications to the city commission pending.
Not to my knowledge,
Okay,
not at the moment.
and then we have to talk about for the good of the city of Fort Lauderdale. So we already had our elections. And it's the second item, which I will defer to Tricia.
Okay. we can talk about it.
So we're on the board discussion of historic preservation incentive.
Right. Yeah, so last meeting, the board voted to place these discussion items on the agenda. And so they're included in that as the historic preservation incentives, the city of Fort Lauderdale's historic preservation design guidelines, and the Sailboat Bend Historic District material and design guidelines.
So starting with the first item here, what incentives does the city give now for historic preservation or any of this?
So I did send out an email last week to the board with links to all of these documents. There was an outline of all of the incentives that we do offer in the city. There's quite a number of them. Some of them slightly financial, some of them just more incorporation into a site plan or development or redevelopment, adaptive reuse. So there's a variety of things, and several of them have been implemented over the past few years.
Can you tell us briefly? some of them?
So there's a tax exemption for properties that are undergoing an improvement to their structure. It's a multi-step application. It's allowed by the state of Florida. And that gives a 10-year tax abatement to basically freeze taxes at the time when you start your redevelopment process, and doesn't change your tax rate for that period of 10 years. But it does require you to take, if you want to take full advantage of it, you do have to go to the Historic Preservation Board prior to starting any work. And then you also have to go to the county's Historic Preservation Board. And ultimately you come back to the city's Historic Preservation Board, come back to the county's Historic Preservation Board, and you have to go to both commissions as well.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's an intensive process, but it is available and it can represent a lot of savings in certain circumstances, but it's usually applicable when you're adding square footage to a property. We also have a tax exemption for commercial properties, and it's a 50% reduction in taxes for commercial properties that fit a definition provided by the state statute. And that's applicable on the city side and the county side. There's a one-page form you have to fill out with the property appraiser's office, and they automatically apply that to your taxes on the following applicable year, if it's a newly designated property and they ask for the resolution.
So Tricia, to lay that into what we just heard as a relocation application, would that give the applicant possibility of building new construction while adding to a contributing property and essentially giving yourself a 10-year abatement on taxes? I mean, that seems like a tremendous incentive all of a sudden.
Yeah.
When
Yeah,
put
on that one,
way.
we would probably have to talk to the property appraiser's office. It also depends on how he actually moves forward.
Right.
Because if he's separating the parcels,
Right,
it may not function because
Let's say
it
he
does have
doesn't
to be
go.
a contributing property.
but if the folio exists in its current form, it does not change,
Mhm.
right? You're saying the existing is contributing, correct?
Yeah,
So for him to add to that, to get technical for a moment.
Yeah.
If it was to connect to the building, right, and that became part of that new townhome structure. Could he then rightfully, in good faith, put that application in for a tax abatement?
we'd have to get clarification from the property appraiser's office as far as if it needs to be connected, if that
Right.
would qualify. But there is someone at the property appraiser's office that deals specifically with these tax exemption programs, so we would just set up a
Okay.
meeting once we have more clarity as far as how he'd like to move forward.
Now, in this instance, my observation of the property would be that it has a house that's more than 650 square feet. So the smaller one, the secondary one he's moving, is less than the 600 square feet. So that's the secondary property, and that's all you can have in the property as, you know, a legitimate
Single family.
family home residence. Then the additional lot that he's doing for the townhouses could come under a different portfolio.
Right.
Well, it is
Series
still-
of portfolios, so.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can have three structures, standalone structures. I
You
guess, on a property. You can't.
Yeah, it's a cluster development.
Okay. So you had to change the ordinance for that.
And
because
now
it's
it's cluster.
RM
B
25.
attached, all three attached. 2, 3, or 4 units attached as a cluster.
Right, so, but they could have, depending. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's not clear, but I'm
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
I think that because it's multiple structures, it might have to be. Have more conditions on it than just a straightforward addition. So-
Yeah, I mean, we
Tricia,
have to
we'll
work with the
find out.
applicant once he has some more concrete ideas.
Now, on this benefit, I've actually asked before, I don't have any knowledge of anybody ever utilizing this incentive or benefit. So to me, it's a real incentive because nobody can practically use it. So it's out there, but it's not really a benefit if nobody uses it.
Well, it's
So
also
it's kind of mute.
very cumbersome.
Exactly.
I
I
mean,
tried to
so-
go through it myself, so I
Yeah.
know that it's got a lot of issues that don't really provide a real incentive for people because there's too many hurdles that are just.
Right.
you know,
I mean, it's just scheduling 5 or 6 meetings
Well, and just for an individual to go through that process, there's, I mean,
without an attorney.
people, companies hire representation to do that, and by the time you gotta weigh,
Then
I'm gonna be
cost a lot.
paying for representation to go through this process to get a discount on my taxes, but then, like, it's just, it
But it has a lot of
doesn't
restrictions too.
seem,
It's a 10-year
it
period.
does not seem like a very,
So the question would be, can we make this
Accessible.
process easier? Is it-
So the state statute outlines the process, and that's what we're tied to, and that's what's repeated within our ordinance locally. But
Okay.
we don't have a lot of flexibility in how we can apply the process.
Yeah, in the Florida Constitution, it lays out that taxes are preempted to the state unless it's in general law, so it has to be in a state statute for us to be able to, so we're limited by that.
Which is what
Good
came up
luck.
last month when I asked about the residential discount for properties that are listed as historic or contributing.
but you're trying to do
Restricted by
this,
law.
you're trying to do this on personal property?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay,
I
I thought you were
said,
saying,
I have in the past explored it
oh,
for a property that I haven't settled in. But
But I think this subject is, for me, probably one of the most important discussions I've had with this board since I've been on it. It's so important to try to Richard, you explained the way that it sounds and the way that it works and or doesn't work. And why isn't it being used? But I met Tricia and got on this board because my neighborhood where my business is in a commercial area was possibly going to be designated as a historical neighborhood, which was a complete out of left field for me. So I started asking questions. What does that mean? What happens next? And of course, if you're talking to the wrong people, they're going to tell you that they're they're coming in with, they're going to make you change your religion and make you eat vegetables for the rest of your life. And you can't have meat.
Okay.
But, you start asking the right people and you get the right answers and you find out that it's not always what it's meant to be, but that's on both sides of the fence. And this is a perfect example. The incentives. When you talk about tax incentives, you need to, one of the things that came to light for me was, when they say a 50% discount, it's 50% of a certain part of your taxes, not all of your taxes. So in my case, if you're paying $23,000 a year on a piece of property in taxes, it doesn't get reduced 50% of 23,000. It's 50% of a portion of that 23,000. For me, I think it came out to be about $4,000. So now I have $4,000 in my hand. And then I go to replace a window or my roof or change something. And I'm over here with you guys at meetings and hiring lawyers and getting architectures to draw pictures. So for my $4,000 savings, I'm potentially looking at spending
Not more.
tons more and aggravation up the yin yang. And it's a business. So if I want to make it bigger or change bathrooms or blah, 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 and you've all seen this happen. my point I'm making today is how important it is for us to not keep kicking this can down the road. We've got to figure out a way to get all the parties that affect this in the same room and say, what's going on? I was on a board probably 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when the beach was being redeveloped. And there was never a discussion about taking money from the big money that was coming into our town, the first big ones, to put it aside for underground, new sewers, new electric, new phones, bury everything, just put a small impact fee on everything. So I've had this discussion with Tricia. I think, our city can think about impact fees on certain ways and put money aside for historic preservation, whether it's contributing to purchasing buildings from private owners that the city's that serious about, that they feel that it's in the best interest of the public to have it and buy it and maintain it and own it and service it, cut its hair, brush its teeth, water its plants, and it's paid for by our tax base. But on the other hand, I think that guys like Bernie, he's 1 in a million. He's got the money to move that house. What's it cost to move that house, Richard? What do you think he's paying to move that house?
Well,
He's paying
you just
$50,000.
acknowledge the fact that commercial properties, and that is one of the incentives, have an opportunity to retain some of the, or receive some money so that they can continue to invest in restoring, retaining the property, preserving their property. That is not available, is what I'm saying, to residential properties, which is why so many people come before the board with this frustration of like, you're making things that much more expensive for the owners. So what is the incentive? There isn't the incentive.
What I'm suggesting today, right now, is it possible, is there a student somewhere at Nova University that's studying historic preservation and city management, that we can give them 4 cases that have come before us and run them down the line and show us how it would have worked if they take this. Plan A is you're not historic, this is what you're paying. Plan B is maybe you're historic, now look at what you're paying. And what is the actual value? Let's put it out
Sad
there.
you're pointing out the state can post that, so we
But
can't.
even so, we could do
This is what,
theoretical explanation of.
after our previous grant that we had that we discussed some of the issues in the city of Fort Lauderdale, it became clear to me, one of the big problems that we have to address is water issues. So it's the rising seawater that's causing a problem to all of these historic homes. And the rainwater that's causing it's accumulating like in April to these properties affecting. So insurance companies don't want to necessarily insure them on these properties. So there's an additional layer, but somehow the city has to provide funds to provide extra seawall for drainage, as well as, in my opinion, provide a grant or some funding available, whether it's an endowed fund that every year they make it available to property owners who are designated as contributing or as historic, that they have access to those funds so they can reserve the properties, have some kind of relief from that from their own cost.
So this is one of the proposals you'd like to propose?
Well, it's one of the things that I was going to throw out as ideas. Now, I think that we don't have the answers ourselves.
No,
I
but we
think that
can
there
throw
are
out ideas.
stakeholders that should be involved in this conversation. So my opinion, I would suggest a charrette or a further discussion with architects, with general contractors, with city staff,
Well,
with this board, whoever that can give you real clues or insight as to what incentives are going to be real for those property owners.
How do they play out when they're applied to an existing actual scenario? I mean, what is it in real English?
I have an idea. Let me speak for a moment, because I wanted to sort of respond to you, and I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, and I'm sorry I interrupted you
It's
earlier.
an open conversation.
But one of the things that's used in other cities that's very popular with applicants is a reduction in permit cost and a reduction in permit time, where it's an expedited review of the drawings.
Like if you're a historic property, you automatically put it in the front
Right,
line.
and that's a big deal with
So
owners.
we did update our fees a couple of years ago for applications to the Historic Preservation Board. There's not many fees for residential properties when it comes to a certificate of appropriateness application.
So eliminate them.
I think the only one is demolition, because it's demolishing a property.
We should charge for demolition.
But what about like, to your point, not just the historic preservation, if there's a historic property and they gotta come to us, and they pay an application fee, then they gotta go other steps. And are there more application fees once they get done with us, or where does the process go from there?
Well, and I thought that was one of the things that we addressed, it's the application fees are reduced or eliminated for historic properties, right?
Yeah, for the most part, the commercial properties do pay certain fees, the residential properties, like I said, I believe it's only demolition and potentially one other, but it's
So go
not
back
any
to the
basic
time.
request.
Why can't the time be expedited?
As far as the time for review, we did implement a lot of code changes to allow staff to review a lot of items administratively rather than taking them through the full board process. So that has reduced a lot of
But
time.
that's for
review.
all projects, right?
I
mean, I'm looking
For
for
historic
something to say to the owner of a historic building. If you go through with this, you will have an expedited permitting process.
And it's only
also-
for those contributing or designated contributing or historic. I think should be given that opportunity as an incentive to retain it rather than tearing it down, building something new.
So as far as like going through the overall historic preservation process, are you talking about that or just permitting?
I'm just talking about permitting.
Permitting, so we did implement a new system at the city, which is citywide. I would say that it does drastically reduce the times of review because we can all review them
But that's for-
simultaneously.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's for everyone, right?
It is for everyone, but I'm not sure if there's an issue.
Well, the issue
The issue is I'm trying
if
to
I
get-
come forward and I say, I want my mid-century Myers home to be designated as historic. Now I have an incentive to retain and keep that property rather than tearing it down before it becomes historic or designated historic. So therefore, my incentive is to make sure that I have some benefit from having it designated historic. So whether it's expedited, I want to make some renovations to my property, I want to do the review here, I want to be ahead of the list of everybody else. So that it's not going to take me 6 months to get approval, it's going to take me 2 months.
I say get rid of the designation.
If
Take these
the.
together, right? In this conversation. There's an application fee for historic designation. We're talking about fees.
Sorry.
If the
Yeah.
ultimate goal of this board is to encourage historic preservation and to encourage owners to want to, whether it be in Sailboat Bend or we've had discussion about buildings that are throughout the city of Fort Lauderdale, I do think you have to come up with some way to incentivize owners, because like, just as a property owner that like, you know, that values historic preservation and has an appreciation for that, it also creates additional hurdles. And it just like all these applicants that become before us, they are basically creating new criteria for themselves. So I agree with Richard and Tim and to what Chairman Marcus was saying is that I think we have to come up with some kind of way to incentivize. Otherwise, we're doing these one-off here and there, and one gets we approve demolition, the other one, they're gonna move it, one who knows what happens, but it's like
My concern is that we're becoming reactionary
yes,
rather than
exactly.
proactive in the process of preserving property.
That's
So
what I'm
that,
saying.
my question to the board is, what do we do to propose something and help Tricia?
I think Richard's Charette idea is excellent, and I'm sorry to say that, it's a long journey.
I'd rather,
I've been on Charette's before but we have to start somewhere.
I
We
think,
have to start somewhere, and I like his idea.
I don't like the idea, only because I think there's so much information that people are gonna be talking about where they don't know what works with the city and what works with the state. or
That's what we're
That's
doing.
what we're having to Charette.
That's what we're trying to figure. We're trying
Well,
to
you have to have a
put
good
things back
moderator.
We're trying
Yeah.
we are not trying to reinvent the wheel.
Whatever.
We're just trying to tune it
I
up.
would rather turn it back to the city and say, what can you propose to streamline the process and the cost specifically for historic preservation?
Well,
But that doesn't help the residents, and what the residents, general contractors, architects want. That just throws owners what the city wants. You're here to serve the residents of the city of Fort Lauderdale. So what do they need? You're not gonna get feedback from them if it's always what the city wants or needs and making their life easier. Great, that's nice, but when residents are unhappy with their city because they're not meeting the needs of their residents, how is that accomplishing anything? Yeah, dissatisfied community.
And I just make a point too, like, this board that we have currently right now, you're an architect. Richard, it's a real. We've got
An
problems.
engineer.
I'm an attorney and that's.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Come on. It's okay. It's okay.
You know, I just want to put it down. I've got business in town that was under the suggestion of historic preservation. We have experience in how this thing affects how it's proposed and how it actually plays out when you put the pants on. Do they fit? And there are more cases where it doesn't fit than where it does. And all we're talking about is retailoring it to where we can make it work better. It's just that simple and an open discussion. We're not, again, you know, I like the idea of just throwing it out there and let's, truthfully, if we were to walk in here and act like we were gonna go up to that podium and he had a residential, you have a commercial, I've got a 100-year-old building that I own and I don't know what to do with. Who do I talk to? Where can I get some help? I don't have any money, but I don't want to see it be torn down. It belonged to my grandparents and my great grandparents. What do I do? Well, you know, you can't.
She wants you to come to Broward Trust.
That's the Broward Trust. We're our guys here right now.
This is a
today.
it's a board meeting, we can't really open it to the public too much.
I thought the
What we're trying to
good of the
do
city could
is,
be open to the public.
Not
what we're
this
trying to
bad
do is
meeting.
figure out
I see.
how we can make it
Sorry.
better.
Okay.
That's all we're trying to do. We're not
But,
trying to.
Yeah, I
reinvent the
do
wheel.
want, like, pointing out, it's like Broward Trust could come to that meeting to give their insights and their input as to what really works for various different stakeholders.
Thank you, Richard.
That
So-
would be, that would be,
I'm going to be.
that would be
my-
the charrette.
You are able to open it up for public comment
If you want.
if you want.
Okay,
When we're done.
Okay, so that,
But if you-
are you?
wait, let's finish this discussion first.
Well, it kind of ties in,
But
so that's why.
when you
I'm
talk,
interested
just
here.
make sure you go to the podium, but I don't think he's ready.
Okay.
So.
Okay, then, go ahead.
So that's my, just try to impress the importance of it is I really hope that we can continue talking on a regular basis or have a workshop or a charrette or whatever the hell you want to call it. But we keep running into where's the money going to come from? What is the process really working? And my goodness, what do you think? What kind of dollars do you think it costs for a person to go through all this and bring it here? And then if he gets no.
Sam, this is typical. Anywhere you go
You have
to,
to produce plans to get.
you gotta produce everything.
But typical or not, it's still at the end of the day, if you want it to be,
It's an extra step to come here.
if we could make it attractive.
And the reality is with downtown in Sailboat Bend District, like, I mean, with sea level rise and flooding, and I mean. We should as a city be encouraging people to want to upgrade their homes. Part of upgrading your home, you have to have some kind of certainty around it, and I agree with Tim that like if there is any process that we can do to be able to put some clarity around that, I mean, otherwise it's one-off,
Well,
like.
We go back,
I'm bringing this is a real issue, because in April, you had the rising seawater. In the H1 district, the entire area had the potential to be swamped with water, and those buildings would have been gone or destroyed.
And if
So-
you're sitting there, what are you're saying, I want to improve my home and I can't, and I've got flood water coming, I mean, it's just, it's an economic issue, it's a historic preservation issue. I mean,
So that's why I'm saying there has to be some kind of
Let's-
funding.
Can we get back to
available for this
the
to happen.
funding issues we were all talking about? And, I'm a little hesitant to say I'm in favor of a charrette on this topic. Only because in the past, when we have held these, they veer wildly off topic with every single, speaker. So I,
to this board, we just
Yeah.
continue to talk about it, but we would have to do it between ourselves, right?
well, no, we can,
In this forum.
we can do it in this forum and have public comment. That's
I think it's having a moderator keeps the whole control of the reins of the conversation and makes it run
Absolutely.
smoothly, and that's where charrette has a moderator to control that, so it doesn't get out of control.
the charrette ends up being me as moderator.
Well, no, it doesn't have to be, but
Be a designated moderator and.
a professional that is a moderator.
I don't care
does
what we
that.
call it.
Oh, okay.
I just want to have a.
She's,
continued
let me
discussion.
recognize
Michaela,
Michaela, sorry,
thank you, Arthur. To the podium.
Yes.
to the podium.
So. I'm finding it fascinating, listening to all these ideas and to Tricia's credit. She works very hard at what she does, for you guys, the city. She's got a limited staff. Much of what goes on, what I've learned through my connection with Broward Trust for Historic Preservation. She's been a mentor to me as well. A lot of what I've learned is that the ULDR, Arthur, you'll understand this probably better than anyone. And all of these guidelines that are in place are not just Tricia's ideas, not just the city saying, this is what we're gonna do. It starts at the federal level. It comes down to the state. From the state, it goes to the local municipalities. They take these ordinances that they put into place based on the guidelines and the rules that the federal government has set up. It's not like somebody standing in the background saying, we want to make this difficult for you. They've been doing this stuff for a long time, and they have this set up for a reason. That's one thing I've learned. Money, lots of money out there. Tricia knows that by the grants that she makes application for. One thing I learned today, historic sailboat bend district had, not so sure anymore, had the potential to become registered with the National Preservation, registered with the National Historic Preservation. Not so much because we're losing our resources. If that became registered, again, you're opening up the door to lots of money at the federal level. People might, individual residential homes might have the option to apply for grants to help them. But you gotta create a district, people. You gotta have a district that shows as a district. Do you think the average tourist that comes through Fort Lauderdale driving through historic sailboat bend has any clue that they're in a historic district?
Other than the signage.
Do you?
If they read it,
If they read it. I know it's a historic district. I remember when it was registered, when they created it back in the late 80s. And I was thrilled because back in those days, you could drive through there and you had a sense. You had a sense that there was something very special about the buildings, the structures, the landscape, even though it was beat up, you had a sense of it. It's going away. We're losing it. And that makes me sad. Charrettes, I'm sorry, Richard, I don't agree with your charrette idea. I agree with Arthur on this. It's gonna be a bunch of people. And nothing will get accomplished. Individual, and thank you for recommending Broward Trust. I'm not the only organization. There are other organizations out there that can help with this stuff. Why not bring maybe once every quarter somebody in that can speak to these issues, to help you guys brainstorm, to find a way to get the city to work with you all a little bit better.
that's an interesting
That's it.
idea.
That's it. That's all I
Thank you.
have to say. I'm moving.
Thank you for your
Sorry.
suggestion.
Thank you so
Don't
much.
apologize.
Appreciate the time, and
Thank
I'm
you,
going to
Michaela.
have to run away. So you'll be happy to know that my little mouth is leaving for the
I
day.
wanted to just piggyback on what Michaela just said. In terms of, thanks, are there? I mean, we don't know a lot about it now. I mean, I don't know everything. As she suggested, are there people in the city who could come and speak to us a little bit about what the incentives are? I know you have very well.
Well, my dilemma is that we actually put it on the agenda this month. and you didn't see anybody
It's
show
not
up.
on, it's not on the agenda.
It is. The
That,
incentives
that
are
doesn't
listed.
count as on the agenda.
So, but that's an example of nobody showed up when they saw it
I
on the
know.
agenda. You're not gonna get architects, you're not gonna be, unless you have an outreach to those people to come and talk to us about their concerns of making this a simpler process, a better process for those property owners.
I would like to say that we have made a lot of progress over the last 6-7 years that Shari and I have been put together as a team. We've implemented a lot of changes into the ordinance, streamlined a lot of processes. We're still in the process of doing that. I would say that I don't receive a lot of complaints about time that it takes to process applications or process permits in particular. We've eliminated fees for residential properties. We've also incorporated 6 new actual incentives
So-
that are in place,
Well,
but we are
that's
at a
what-
point,
that's the
we are at a
problem.
point where we need to find a funding source, if that is the problem.
And-
And, and
Right,
that
and
is
so that-
all that's left.
One of the questions, can we make a motion to the city of Fort Lauderdale? You have a priority, you've stated it in your annual statements that historic preservation is a priority. So where is the money that you're indicating that this is a priority? You're not making a priority by just making a
If
statement.
we had gotten the money, Tricia would have a staff of 15.
Well, but
And
whatever,
I would say-
whether it's the property owners or it's the staff,
Okay.
it's still like an indication that you're saying more than just the words.
That's it.
I would say that I've also been actively applying for and getting grants to fund different objectives that are outlined in our strategic plan and in our comprehensive plan. But I am not aware of a grant that's out there to give money to just start a program locally out of city.
What about
But
if you were
If there
to,
is, I'm willing to apply to it.
what about if you were to at least take the incentives that you have now, that I guarantee you most people have no clue about, and have a little pamphlet that you give out to people who apply, maybe you have a mailing list, but just to publicize.
But under their back end, that's the whole problem with them. You have to be able to lay the money out in order to pick it up, and the pickup isn't all that worthwhile, so you're making a big wager.
Yeah.
That's, and
So we need
I just
to
want to
know
make one
ideas.
point about Tricia's point. The city's never been faster at what they're doing. I've made applications for 5 or 6 years. My first application was 5 years ago. It is 5 to 10 times faster than it's ever been, including permitting. I submitted a permit a week ago. I have comments back from half the review desk
Or what kind of permit for what?
for new construction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not for historic, but if it got to historic, Tricia would be the last person
Right.
in the entire city I would be worried about commenting. She gets back at light speed, so I don't think it's a turn time preference, I don't think it's a preferential treatment of an application, it's about money. It really is, and that's it, and a lot of life comes down to that in a lot of ways,
Always.
as brutal as that might seem sometimes. So if we wanna have a real incentive, how are we gonna collect for that incentive? Because Tricia, in the time you've been in your position, how many applications have come forward for some form of incentive? Can you, is it too many to remember, or is it?
Yeah, it's not that many that come forward.
Right.
We do have the transfer of development rights program that,
Right.
you know, we're working with a couple of people trying to explore that as an option, but we haven't completely gone through the process on it.
But-
I would say the most used incentive is that commercial tax exemption or tax
Okay.
credit that comes off automatically because it's just so straightforward.
Easy.
Yeah.
Which is why like the Hyatt or that building said, I'm gonna apply
So-
because they're saving a lot in their taxes.
In order to wrap up this discussion for today, how should we go forward? Should we have another continue the discussion at the meeting next week? I'd like to have more suggestions as to what could be on the table.
See, I looked at it as, I saw the city having grants or money available for different reasons, like Progressive. Like they provided allocated funds for those communities that were underserved for a long time. And so,
That you're talking about the community redevelopment agency.
That's what it sounds like they're
Right.
trying to do de facto here.
right, so
That's what it seems
like
like.
there
And
is
they're
got to
already
be the
into it.
city, if they're investing in making this a priority, just like they did with those underserved communities, they've got to say, this is an underserved resource
Mhm.
or asset that the city has. You're saying you want to make it a priority, but you're not doing anything. And this is where you've got to allocate some funding for that to be available to people to
I hate
preserve their
to
property.
say it, Richard, but I really have never felt that historic preservation is a priority in the city.
Well, then.
No matter who's listening. But I mean, I think we're here to make it one. And I don't know how, we've tried.
Good point, and again, we're not really going in circles, but we're going in like kidney sheep. But we're getting there, and it's important because, you know, I've been having a conversation similar to this with Trish from the day I met her. And we all truly want pretty much the same thing. We want to preserve history. We know, we all feel how important it is. Pass it on and maintain it. But at the end of the day, you know, when we were kids, they used to say, let's all go to the movies. You know, who's driving? Your mom. She's got a station wagon. It's $2 a head. Who's got money? Kid who doesn't have money doesn't go. So we don't have money. The people sometimes who come here, they don't have the resources to maintain an historic property. And yet we'll sit here as a board and say, but you have to.
So it's run
And so
down.
the
and
building
it's-
goes down and it falls apart. And then what?
and That's
then
that's
hello.
the point I'm making.
And you don't want to see development, and then it goes on the market for spit. And you get something built there that we didn't want in the first place because the system has failed in a certain way. So, you know, I don't know where, now, I know this is not Tricia's job to figure all the finances out and everything else, but there's
Which is
got
what I
to
kind of hear
be,
you're doing, pushing it back to see.
there's got to be.
Well, I don't think we have enough expertise
Can we
right now.
present something though that, sorry, if you can speak to this, is it well beyond the context and jurisdiction of the historical board to present to the city commission or float something that is more concrete? For example, would it be crazy? Would it be too outlandish for us to present, calling it a penny tax or a nickel tax on any ticket sold in the Broward County Performing Arts Center, to present as something that if they would be on board with, to fund something that they utilize and traffic quite often, as something that is that well beyond where we're
Yes.
charged by the city to.
With the penny tax, it comes from a statute. The CRA stuff, that comes from a statute. So what happened is everything essentially with the funding starts out with the Constitution. So in the Constitution, it says in Article 7, it says that we are prohibited essentially from aiding any sort of corporation, association, partnership, or individual person coming from our tax money, our funds. So unless there's something in the statutes that say that we can do it. So the CRA, anything you see with that, that's coming from a statute. The penny tax, it actually started out with a statute and then it went to the electorate to vote on it. So we are very limited on what we can use. We can't just take money and give it. So you'll see like in tomorrow's city commission meeting, they're gonna try to aid people that from the disaster that happened, but that's from a statute. See, I can tell you which statute that's from. So if we can't give away money without a legal basis for doing so. So I can do more research to see if there's any statute out there that enables us to do that. But I haven't seen it yet, but I can still keep looking.
Can I just have a follow up to that? And that was an excellent explanation. Can we then amend or apply for temporary status to be incorporated into the CRA specifically for the Civil Event Design District, Historical District?
Historic districts.
Right.
I think that's unlikely because the CRA, I think, is gonna sunset pretty soon. I'll have to check. the
Yes,
stats
next year,
on
I believe it does.
So I'll check about that, but
Okay.
I think there's gonna be a sunset, so I'll check.
So just for hypothetical sake, if it does sunset and then just solely gets extended to incorporate this new district for the exact purpose we're describing, is that something that's more formidable as a way to approach this and fund it?
Well, I think with the CRA, the whole thing is it's usually blighted areas and
Mhm.
stuff, so unless you're saying that area in Silver Bend is
I
blighted.
think you have a hard
I
time.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, but she actually implied that 20 years ago, it was a little more. money.
What-
Those are the
what
terms.
I don't know.
I know.
haven't been-
I know, but
That's a great idea. We need to find something we can piggyback possibly or blend. How does historic preservation properties come under an umbrella that's already existing, that has funding? But we're, you know, trying to take this on. I just think perhaps maybe we could just, if we could just find a few bucks for the city to, I hate to use words like study, but if we could just get
I think we
a
should.
program set up where it shows the city how it doesn't work, and bring it back to them. To say, look, this is how it works. We have a residential, we have a commercial, we have these, like your favorite.
Well, and it might even go into
Okay.
like private partnership with the city saying, we want to start something as an endowed fund for historic preservation. And this is a fund that we're available every year with the profits from that investment that goes to these properties that need a little help and raising them so they're not flooding.
100%.
Or that changing their roof, doing whatever is
Richard,
necessary.
wait,
But
okay.
that's a public-private partnership that you could be
As
initiated.
good as this sounds, and we do that, I'd rather defer to charity.
And throwing out ideas. That's a.
Yeah, so I could read you from the public-private partnership statute, so it applies to qualified projects, so. It's a facility or project that serves a public purpose, so it's not gonna be like a private
House,
residence. So it includes any ferry, mass transit facility, vehicle parking facility, airport, seaport facility, rail facility. Fuel supply facility, these are public things, so it's not
Okay,
anyone's private property, a medical or nursing facility, recreational facility.
I have a feeling that unfortunately, all of our ideas have been shut down. today. I mean, I want to ask everybody, because we're going around here and we've had some good ideas thrown out, but how do we go forward?
Well, I think the reality is, I think this board and its like, the design of it is limited. Like, we're here to, as citizens, to look at these applications and to make, and from what she is saying and what seems appropriate to me is really at the end of the day, any significant change, any kind of funding, any kind of situation with the CR, really comes down to the commissioners. Each one of us are here appointed by a commissioner.
But that's the
And-
point, is to make a recommendation.
I have an idea that one
Well,
thing we,
but I think
one thing we, let you finish up here. One thing we can do is write a communication to the commission. I don't know how helpful it is, but that is within our purview.
Yeah, I mean, you were all appointed for a reason, from a relationship with somebody that you know, commissioner or community member or prominent on this issue, and I think that we should all be talking about something. Richard has a great idea. He should be talking to the commissioner that appointed him, as we all should, because that's really where the change, in order to create the statute that she's talking about, it has to happen at the city commission. And we all see that the system's broke. They see the system's broke. They're not oblivious to the system. being
Well,
broke.
maybe in our communication, if we do something like that, we list all the ideas that we
We
like.
gotta get organized on it though. I mean, we just.
Well, we can't do it.
But I think we should also come with like a formidable
Absolutely.
position, not just how do we do this, not so opaque, it's just gotta be more, for example, to piggyback off the TDRs. Would there be an objection to organizing a TDR opt-in for the entire district to see what could be aggregated and then possibly sold to raise money? I mean, is that, if there's nothing flushed out to try to realize monetary incentive, it's all just sitting on paper. It's very difficult to realize it. I mean, is that, again, throwing things on the wall? I'm not proposing that we do that.
I think the issue with the TDRs is that there are some people that have used all of their development rights on
Sure.
the property and some that haven't, so
Right.
it's individually analyzed based on the property itself.
No, I understand.
So I think that's the issue with that, because there's a two-step process. We calculate how much development rights you have. And then after that, you go through the transfer, and it's a private transaction between you and the buyer.
Okay,
We also don't have a TDR thing.
Trish.
we don't, the city doesn't?
Right, it's private, so it's like you make the deal with that buyer.
Right.
The city of Sunny Isles Beach has a bank, but it's a lot smaller city and, you know, things are different there, but we didn't opt to do it.
So where are those rights to the transferee allowed to be taken once they're acquired? Can they be taken anywhere in the city? Do they have to be utilized in the district solely?
No, there's certain districts that we can, so we don't allow them to transfer to, let's say, the Barrier Island or.
Okay.
those, and that's prohibited by, I think, the county and, you know,
Do we have a map of that, of the districts that are permitted?
yes.
We do?
I've looked at that and I kind of like wondered, because I have properties in the district, but it's like you're diminishing the value by exercising that right. Because if I want to resell my property, then, all right, I've already sold that off, so suddenly my property won't have the resale value in the future for someone else. So you might get a short-term benefit me, but long-term, if you sell your property, that asset, that right is gone. So it has a limited incentive.
It depends. Everyone has to make that
Tricia,
assessment.
in really tight wording. The way we do things in Fort Lauderdale, how much different or same is it to Miami and St. Augustine? Or does each city have its own?
In terms of historic preservation,
Yeah. I believe so.
every city is very different.
Well, that was the case.
I
Sorry.
wouldn't say it's very different,
Not
but
very, but
there
just-
are some differences.
Okay, so that's all I needed to know because like I'm trying to find a starting. I'm like ready to get in my car and drive to St. Augustine and say, okay, who's the big dog? I want to go find the Arthur in St. Augustine and all the board members and find the Tricia up there and go, how do you guys do it?
I would
Here's
say
here's an
overall-
application.
Rather than reinventing the wheel,
Yeah,
ask them.
Yeah, how did you handle this? And then when they come back and say, well, how come you guys don't have the blah, blah, blah? Or didn't you know about X, Y, Z? This is how we do it. Then say, hey, I got an idea. It's
I
a
would say
start.
overall, in
I'm
the
just-
state of Florida, you're gonna find a lot of similarities and not a ton of differences. It would probably be more nuanced based on like specifics for a district or like in Miami, there's a couple of historic districts that have their own design guidelines. Like we have our own ordinance for Sailboat Bend Historic District. It has
I'm
very
more concerned
specific
about
information.
funding. Like, what would prevent, is there anything, Sherry, legally that would prevent the city from saying, if you do this, we'll split it down the middle?
Yes, so we're limited to spending our funds based on for a public purpose. And then in addition to that, the Florida Constitution says we can't aid individuals, corporations, or anything like that unless it says so in a statute. It authorizes us to do that.
Well, it is for a public
I-
purpose, it's for the good of
Right,
the city,
right,
because
but
it's historic preservation.
Right, but the issue is that, generally speaking, when we spend our funds, it comes from a statute. A statute will tell us that we can spend it this certain way unless it's in case law or some other place. I just haven't found a statute that authorizes us to hand money to someone to build their seawall or to put a new roof on or anything like that. I don't see any authority in the Florida statutes, so we are limited by that. Additionally, I just wanted to share that someone tried to pass a statute for additional historic preservation tax credit. That is Senate Bill 288, and that failed at the last legislative session. So someone tried to give more money. This one was a little bit more. This one actually said it was providing a credit against a state corporate income tax and insurance premium tax for qualified expenses and rehabilitating historic structures and more tax credits, and it failed. So
Isn't that the same Senate that wanted to flood every historic district in the state?
what I'm essentially saying is that some of the incentives can be provided at a higher level than the city commission, if that makes any sense, you know.
If I'm looking at, I vaguely remember seeing that there were funds available for private properties in Dorsey Bend and Progresso for applicants to say, I need $5,000 for plantings or painting my house or something like that.
There's some federal CDBG funds and also there's CRA funds, you know, that are different from this. Those are all authorized by statute. So essentially we're talking about historic preservation, which is different from CRA.
And there's
Well, I'm trying to find an avenue to
Yeah.
weave to get this kind of funding like that is, because it's comparable. So that these property owners can have access to funds to preserve the properties or an incentive to do it anyway. It's not coming out of their pocket time and time again, just to see it destroyed by rising waters and flooding into their home.
Right. I don't see any statutes like that, but I don't mind to look.
So since none of our ideas are viable today, I'm just wondering, might it be good to continue this and think about it for a month and come back? I mean, I don't know where else to go with this, because I don't have any positive direction.
Well, we could do that, but, I mean, there's so much to talk about. I just, if we don't have to get answers. We have lots of questions. I'd just like to get
Yeah,
us.
Sharon's been
Get it
getting
together
together.
to where we have what we're looking for and how are we going to get there? I started to mention to you that your Castro building,
Castro.
If you were sitting here.
Yes, I know.
on Mr. Castro building and you're saying, you know, you can't, you need to preserve it, it's beautiful, and you give me all your reasons, and I say, okay, what are my incentives?
Well,
And you say, here they are.
Exactly.
This is what the county's gonna do for you, this is what the city's gonna do. And I'm gonna look at you and say, well, let me tell you what Walmart's gonna do. They're gonna give me $42 million for my property. And I'm never gonna have to work again, and my great grandchildren are gonna have to work.
but you can't build Walgreens on your property. Anyway,
If it's really historic.
I want to wrap this up for
This is
today.
the point I'm making, what I'm trying to kind of blend here is, we won't have to get to that point. If Mr. Castro early on knew that he could make a great contribution to the city by keeping that building because he's got resources. But he may not even know that he could do something like that. And he may not even know that he can get those benefits until somebody's knocking on his door and he feels like it's the Gestapo.
We're gonna
telling
find
him
out.
what he can't do.
We're gonna find out because Mr. Castro's coming back.
So that might have been a bad example, but how do we move forward? Richard, what would you like? I'm willing, I'll tell you, I'm willing to work with anybody. And I am gonna start asking some questions.
I would-
You haven't chimed in yet, please introduce yourself.
I think when we try to compete for dollars, the issues that you raise, CDBG, CRA, homelessness. I don't think that we win those dollars. And so your recommendation of going to the influencers, does this board ever promote success? We approved X building here and we go out with a commissioner and we talk about it. So is there a way to build through goodwill? Are there private enterprises that would be interested in this cause? Because I just don't know that the federal government or the state government will pony up for this, but there are other avenues, other types of advocacy campaigns that politically you can achieve an outcome. And as
Are you familiar with them? That'd be helpful.
I'm familiar with a lot of them, sure.
Alright.
And have done a lot, but I think it's harnessing goodwill and relationships and promoting things. And that was the point I made earlier. I don't hear enough about it. And I think the general public perceives our discussions around historic preservation, those people already have one. They live in these nice houses. They have this.
Not
they have that.
always.
You're right. No, I get it. And we're different, you know, we're looking at it from a different lens, but the more macro perspective is there are so many housing issues today that are far more excruciating.
I think we can talk to Tricia and ask her how long she's been trying to get additional funds and additional staffing.
Yeah, and even with the little she had, she's done a lot around efficiency gains.
She actually has 10 hands.
She's done an incredible job over the last several years, and she's right. We've made a lot of improvements, a lot of changes in a short amount of time. I mean, there was just stuff that was just not being turned over. It was just sitting there and just being treated like, you know, the 10 Commandments. You've really done a great job in wiggling things around and making things better. And we're really truly discussing just going to another step. There's always room for improvement, and I'm glad you brought up the permitting process, because I didn't think the permitting process was a problem. And you said it too.
It's the best
It's
it's ever been.
always about the money. That's the first thing I said the first day I was on this board. We have to find money. And I'm not saying money fixes everything, but money's needed in this process. Money's needed. It would make it a lot easier for a lot of buildings would still be standing if there was better incentives and less money on the onus of the property owner.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is I need to express my concern about being reactionary rather than proactive in preserving our history of Fort Lauderdale. Communicate that to commissioners. That's really what my goal is here, and coming up with ways to incentivize people rather than always being reactionary. I suggested this before, and it's more to me, again, a community's gesture with there's a community appearance award. All right, I suggest that we have something for properties that are historic have plaques, like I think some of them do for national designation, but not necessarily city, or contributing properties. They have those awards, they give them out, they put the plaques in these homes, but there's nothing for contributing homes to give them like, oh, see, my house is contributing. It's just like, you had to figure it out on your own when you're going by. That's again,
No,
superficial,
the city-
gesture.
the city is designated as historic. That comes from the city.
There are no plaques for contributing properties.
There never are. There's only usually
But
plaques.
there are
for
ones for
historic.
community appearance awards, and so I'm
The
just saying
Historical
that.
Society has a plaque program, but it is voluntary, and you do have to purchase it through them, but they started that years ago.
But is a plaque really gonna give
No,
an
that's what I'm saying,
incentive
it's
to
really a
people?
superficial thing, that's not real incentive.
I get back to what,
That's all we just kind of end up doing, is these little.
but I get back to what Sim said. Sim said it's really about the money. So I think we're not coming up with good ideas today.
I have
that are
one
viable.
thing.
Please.
We're talking about everything retroactively, right? All historic preservation of existing structures. What if on the new stuff, for example, what was going to be, what was deferred today, what if it perfectly met the criteria? Everything was met, right? And just say for a moment, it comes in with a perfect box check off everywhere. What if the city got involved in waiving permit fees there? Then you have a net savings of somewhere between $1,000. If someone takes the,
Okay,
you've got a building that's an $800,000 house, this guy has a house.
or at least a decent reduction.
Well, waiving those fees.
I'm saying waiving it.
Yeah.
If
Well,
you,
I mentioned that
So
before.
it is the architect saying, I can meet all the criteria, and
Right.
therefore all of it will be waived, because it meets every single.
right, there
criteria.
was a good comment by the public, if we want to create a cohesive district, and this is speaking to Sailboat Bend, this isn't speaking, it can't speak beyond that, but you've always been a district guy, right? You want to create a
I
district.
tried.
So what if it is in play on the new stuff? Because then truly it's realized, I mean, I.
What do you mean by the new stuff?
The new
Yeah.
construction,
And they
this
are
new
more-
construction,
okay.
instead of trying to work backward, because it's very difficult for sea level rise, for reasons that have been cited tonight.
Right.
To incentivize an owner to keep a property up through solely this type of incentive, I think it comes down to, in a lot of cases, pride. Pride of owner, they want to do it, but if we can incorporate into what is incoming, we're seeing a lot of new construction applications. You see one almost every agenda, right? Every agenda has a new, for the most part. You could add them up to, let's say, be 24 per year, they come, give or take, probably a little less than that. But if we're, as a city, if the city's willing to waive those fees, I would think there would be a ton more incentive to align everything you're doing, not to partial, but to full meeting of the criteria. And then
Let's.
Yeah,
Michelle.
I'll have to check. I'm looking at the impact fee statutes. I'll have to check to give you an answer on that.
but the impact fee part of it could still be in play. You can
Because
still
that
collect
is
the impact fees.
Working with the architects again going forward.
The impact
to-
fees can still work, because you have parks, you have schools, not saying that,
Right.
solely permit, and where that little bit of pro bono factors into the city. You have this maybe overspend on the architectural engagement to be able to assure it's in place.
I'll
And
let
then-
Shari research, but I don't believe that you
Yeah,
can take
that's-
away the permit fees.
Yeah, I think the permit fees are under the Florida Building Code, and I don't think you have authority.
Another one. I think we really should put our thinking hats on and see what else we can come back with, because Shari, thank you for your expertise.
Yeah.
As disappointing as it may have been.
Always not reading that.
It's hard, it's hard, there's a lot of tape,
Pardon?
Do a
Tangled
fundraiser.
web,
you know? It's like,
Yeah, I mean, that's,
Hey, there you go.
that's not out of the question. I mean, am I incorrect in saying that the inception of historic preservation started with a bunch of wealthy individuals who didn't want to see the deterioration?
That's not how it
Their-
started on
their-
this page.
At contrary, I think it was these.
Was
people
it
who loved the.
And,
Yeah.
and there was a bunch of their wives and social groups that said, hey, we need to do something about this. We want to keep these things. And that's how it got started, with contribution from people who had money.
So
So
can we?
it was money.
So this is an example too of something you can do, because
So wait,
as you
wait,
said, it was public
Hold on,
funds.
can we do this? I want to ask Sharon.
Well, no, I'm referring back to the, in the private-public partnership, where it has to be public land. So if you make the community, you uplift the community by the streets or by the parks or by other things within the community to make it look like, oh my God, like we said, a pride in your community, that these people say, I'm gonna meet these criteria. I'm gonna like make this the special community, that is a way to incentivize some of these people to do better. I don't know.
No, that's a good point. I mean, that's another branch on this tree to say, one of the other things that we could do, we can't get people involved because they say financial incentive. We can educate them and put a spin on it to stimulate their pride in their community. You have this property, you know, not so much say you can afford to do it, but say, if you can do this, if you choose to do this, this would be a wonderful contribution. You know, I have a plaque on my wall that I'm so proud of for my daughter, and it'll be in the archives of the city forever. When I was, I believe it was Citizen of the Year, but it's there forever. So a person who designates their property, funds it, takes care of it, their family name is in an archive in this city forever. It's a wonderful thing to be proud of. So it shouldn't be just something that you go before this board with and have your fingers crossed and hope you can build your fence. So to speak. No, I make a good point. There's a lot of stuff we can do, and Arthur, I don't think we're throwing stuff up on a wall and watching it fall down today. And I think we have our thinking hats on. And I don't know how many years I've been on this, but I think we've covered some good ground today, and we stimulated a lot of
My
fresh
question would
thinking.
be, we had some great ideas, but which of them are really feasible?
Well, that's the next step. Let's find out.
Sherry's looking very hesitant.
Yeah, I mean,
It's trying to get someone now to go forward and
yeah,
collect some of these ideas that might be fruitful for us to present to the commission.
What about instead of a partial waiver of fees, a partial contribution to funding Sailboat Bend Historic District through that fee
That's a great
allocation?
idea.
and
See city being friendly with what's coming in there,
we would take money from who for that?
the building department?
Developers in the city.
From the developer's application?
No, I'm not, from the, yes, from the developer's application, in some ways. It would have
You
to be,
pointed out that with the developers in the beach community, that there was an impact fee or whatever that was given to it. So is there some way of getting impact fees from developers throughout the city for historic preservation?
Anybody who builds new contributes to what is old.
You have
They
so
missed that
many
one so long ago.
opposed
Yeah.
to.
And that's a
contributing
shame.
to A small little.
But they can still do it now. It should
Yeah.
not be as big of an impact, but it's a start. It's a start. It's
Well, because
something-
they use those impact fees for so many things for the tourists in the city of Fort Lauderdale. Okay, that's great for dollars spent in the city, but it really doesn't help the residents. It helps the tourists. And that's on the preservation. So this is supposed to be for the residents of the city of Fort Lauderdale to try to preserve this and to make it a highlight of what the city has, but
The impact fee statute was recently amended. And it's definitely very strict
Oh.
with what we can do. If I read it to
you're not
you,
helping it.
no, it's not, it's the Florida legislature. They're not very local government friendly, believe me, so.
Well, I think our discussion is helping. And I think that we should continue talking and keep digging until we find something. I have a million questions. I'll try to write them down, Sherry. I'm not gonna burden you with a bunch of questions, ask you to do all the homework. I still think that we have an opportunity maybe to go to Nova University, get some kids in here and see if we can get one of these schools to make it work for them, if they can get some sort of accreditation or points.
It could be a project for a student, you know, to say.
Yeah,
help us
exactly.
research
Say,
that.
hey, listen,
Somebody who's interested in historic.
Go
preservation.
research the dollars that are in the state of Florida that could.
It could be a legal student that wants to do this, so.
On every damn level. Let
Well,
them come back with a bucket full of stuff and we go through it.
I think you had a good point earlier about Sarasota or St. Augustine, just
Yeah,
see what they,
how do
see
you
what's
do
been
it?
done in the past.
Yeah, how do you guys do it? What's going on? Then maybe go to Miami and to their historic districts and ask them the same question. Call somebody in Boston, San Francisco. Maybe something new and fresh will pop up and we'll say, wow, I never thought of
Well,
that.
Trish, can
It's
you
worth
go
a
back
try.
to that consulting company that was part of the stuff that we did this past year and see if they have any ideas that they can offer? Or have you already explored those?
Well, we can't go back to them because,
They charge you a fee.
yeah,
You
our
got paid.
contract is over.
Well, maybe
That
it's
was-
just simple like, okay, here's resources, here's an email.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of like I would say a lot of places that do have some sort of grant program, it was from a private donation and it's embedded either in the city or it's embedded into a nonprofit organization that disperses it. I used to work in San Antonio. The San Antonio Conservation Society had a private donation, and they do a bi-yearly grant program where homeowners can apply to it and they disperse funds. And it's, I don't know if they always require a match or not, but it's usually in small amounts, but it's just to help.
So does Sherry,
Help in a way,
so,
but that's for a
so,
nonprofit
so
organization.
Mr. Finkelstein dies and leaves $100 million for historic preservation to the city of Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
What happens to that money as it's written in the law today?
Well,
How do they get their hands on it and use it for historic preservation?
yeah, I mean, he would have to, the city commission would have to accept that money. We don't have any authority to automatically accept it, so they'd have to go through acceptance of it. And then determine based on whatever he requested to spend it appropriately. But I'm not sure what that would be used for.
So if we were to
rate.
become a fundraising, if there was a fundraising machine for historic preservation,
Yes,
we are, right now, we would have to go to work and find a way to disperse those funds when they entered into the city's.
You're probably have to go to a
Well,
nonprofit,
In other cities, there are nonprofits,
right?
nonprofit historic preservation groups that do just that.
But then they'd still be under the guise and the control of the historic preservation. and
Well, isn't the city of Rhode Island a nonprofit anyway?
They still be coming here when they
Well,
want. to.
exactly,
The
they
city's not a
want to
problem.
when they want to, and they want.
it's not,
when they
but I
don't.
think sometimes city, they create additional not-for-profit corporations, just like how you have the city of Pembroke Pines, they have charter schools, it's a separate entity than this
Yeah.
city. It's under the city, but it has its own,
The city of Fort Lauderdale doesn't have anything like that.
not that I know of, I'm not in finance, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just a thought.
This is a very healthy discussion.
So, yeah.
I was fine with that. I don't know how much further we want to go with it tonight, but I just wanted to open the dialogue because I
Yeah.
thought that these were issues that we're ignoring really.
Yeah, I don't
With
think
you,
the impact
100% away.
can be done based on my reading of the statute. I could read some of this stuff to you, but I'll be glad to email it, but it's not good, so.
So Tricia, do you have any ideas to close the discussion?
I would say,
Beyond-
yeah, like we've already discussed. If there's a funding source, then there's different potential avenues, but that funding source isn't necessarily the city. And then it, there's always a legal discussion as far as, can we do this? Can we do that?
Exactly.
And we always have to research what is possible, but in other locations, they have had outside funding come in to establish those programs.
Well, maybe that's one suggestion we can have. We just have to find out that funding.
But I would say we've done a lot of work as far as the incentives are concerned. Other than that, I don't know if there's a magic solution.
No,
So we've done a lot of research and a lot of work to try to implement what we can without money.
Well, I know everybody would like to move on, so I'll
So do
just
you-
put this last thought on the table. As we're talking about everything, so it's just out of the box. And at some point in time, I would bring it up anyway, that I wondered if we could ever consider the idea of different levels of historic preservation to create historic preservation, a practical preservation of our history. And there would be the purist side, which you spoke to earlier, where we have checked all the boxes. And it is in its perfect form, original form, and it's going to be maintained that way. But between that and it falling apart and being knocked down, and in between, if there's some other definition, it's not completely historically preserved, but it's partially historically preserved, and it meets a new criteria that does get funding. That may be one of our ways to keep something here rather than lose it all.
So the
Because
city of
it's
Fort
all or
Lauderdale's
nothing at all.
ordinance follows
What's that?
the city of Fort Lauderdale's ordinance follows the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. That is the flexibility that you're talking about.
Okay.
There's different standards that are outlined within the Secretary of the Interior standards. The most stringent one is for preservation. And that's something we do apply to certain properties within the city that are meant to be pristinely preserved, meaning the Bonnet House, the Stranahan House, they are museums. So we want to make sure that everything is appropriately done
As it should be.
and is viewed in its most pristine sense. Otherwise, we do apply the rehabilitation standards, which does give us some flexibility in the materials that are chosen and the way things are applied and additions being attached.
And that has been coming across.
Which is the
That's in
contributing.
front of me
Right.
for a long time. I just
And
never
those-
knew that
yeah.
that was where it came from.
Yeah, and
Never met its
that
mother.
is how our criteria
Okay.
in our code is written with that flexibility in mind.
So one question as we close, would everyone like to continue this after we
Yes.
thought about it for a month? So can we maybe put it on the,
I actually wanted.
Communication again? Pardon?
There's one other thing I wanted to get clarification on too.
All right, so I'm just saying, Patricia, could we
Put it
put
on.
this, can we put this on to further the discussion next time?
4th of
Do you
July.
want to make a motion? That would be for the July 11th.
I can't make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we continue this discussion on a July 11th agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And Richard, for one last comment.
I have one clarification, I guess, on this property, like last month that came up with the figures. Is that, I think this came up
The
with
big beginning from?
yeah, with the commissioners of having a discussion about what has been the definition for Sailboat Bend with historic district. And there's been some gray area about what are houses that are contributing, because that house kind of fell that period, and so it came to a discussion like, is there a rolling time period? And so there's this vagueness, I think, out there about really when does a period stop and what is the period for Sailboat Bend versus this rolling time period? So did the city actually clarify what their position was on what the time period was for contributing at Sailboat Bend?
So it does, within a historic district, the assessment of what is contributing and non-contributing is not automatic. It's done at times when you're doing architectural resource surveys.
Right.
So when we updated the survey a couple of years ago, we did take into account the original language that was written in the survey and assessed all properties based on that information. Within that report, the original report, it does describe properties that were built throughout the 1940s and 50s as being significant. It was slightly extended into 1961 because there are properties that are identical to 1959 that were constructed and have their certificate of occupancy issued in 1961 by the same architect. So you can't necessarily eliminate them from the contributing label. You wouldn't necessarily, you won't have an update every single year saying this is now contributing because it's hit 50 years. You would generally look at what is the original basis for that district. I know South Beach, for example, has updated their district listing probably 3 times over the years. And generally it's not a huge group that's added every time to the contributing list. Sometimes none, sometimes it's just an update of the record to say this was actually demolished now, so it's no longer contributing because it doesn't exist. But early on, I think there was probably maybe 20 buildings in the first round, just because they did hit the time period, they did become significant, and they were based on the original context, the historic context for the neighborhood. But it's not an automatic thing.
Right.
And in this case, when we did the survey, the beginning properties, particularly the one that came before us last time, was not 50 years old and could not be included because it's not necessarily related either to the rest of the district. When you look at the remaining of the homes and the architectural styles that are represented and the time periods, it's a stretch to go from 1961 to 1971 and say everything between 1910 to 1961 is contributing. And then we have this one more contributing property built in 1971. So there has to be that level of analysis as well, because the time period
How I
can't be
did
extended.
that was that house could be designated as historic on its own
Mhm,
for the city of Fort Lauderdale and not because it was in Sailboat Bend.
correct.
Okay, so some of these other properties that I see that you have listed as mid-century modernist is not really of that same vernacular or period that is of concern, so.
It is.
That, but then it becomes a rolling time period,
Visiting house,
but. No, we're saying that was individually, had nothing to do with being in Seattle then, that you would classify it as historic.
Right.
So, and that's what I'm pointing out with some of these other ones that they're not really contributing because they're outside of that period of which is really described as Seattle then versus something that should be nominated as historic for its own architectural mid-centuryist character. I think that's what I saw the commissioners kind of looking at is like, you're not really defining the district as, you know, a period of time that it was originally intended. Now you're skipping over by putting mid-centuryist modernist and you're trying this other, Bigoni has a different character, and those are fine as individually designated within the city of Fort Lauderdale, but not as part of Sailboat Bend and that original description. of what
Well,
was
I think,
defined
I
as
think
historic.
the Sailboat Bend district guidelines would need to be changed to accept mid-century. I find there's a dearth of great legislation here, or saving buildings. We haven't been able to save our buildings.
Right.
Another one that I presented last year was just torn down, the Bayview office building over on Sunrise.
Okay, well, I guess my.
Anyway, we get to the
That
point.
topic of conversation, my understanding is it came up with the commissioners recently this past month. I was away on vacation.
It's coming.
So I missed
The
it.
house
So
is coming
I
back.
think that there was a little bit of like you and Glassman kind of had one position, the other commissioners were a little confused and weren't clear. And so that's what I'm trying to clarify as to, as a board, how are we supposed to be viewing Sailboat Bend if it's a rolling time period, as we're kind of alluding with mid-century modern properties and these other ones? Or are we saying individually that house needs to be designated, not because it's in Sailboat Bend?
I think we're on the historic preservation group. We not only deal with it historically, but also we have to talk about architectural significance. If the time period were okay and the house came before us and it was designated historic because it's over 50 years, maybe other people would have a different idea about the house. This is why it's going back to the commission next.
Okay, so I'm just saying that some of those houses that
Okay,
would be considered mid-century modernist, not necessarily with what I understand as being the original intent of Sailboat Bend as that period. So
But
that
what-
period of significance, so we should take those properties and nominate them for historic properties or homes
Or you-
because they
or you-
stand alone as noteworthy for mid-century modernist.
why can't they be incorporated into a historic district? Many other cities have many different eras of architecture within one historic district. It doesn't just have to be 1920s. I think that's not good for the neighborhood. I'd rather see an entity of the neighborhood. Anyway, we should stop. We've talked enough. We'll have this on the agenda, not on the agenda, but afterwards for a talk next time.
Did you want us to email you the resolution that lays out the list of the contributing and non-contributing, and it also has a survey in it? Do
That'd be
you want
great.
that?
I have that from the city, so I have it, but I don't know if it's.
We have all the information available on our
Yeah, it's all-
website. There's
Okay.
an interactive map, look at all the properties in Sailboat Bend.
What about all the, one last question, what about all the properties that you've noted in your, I don't know what you call them, but surveys of all the neighborhood? Which I was really impressed with, it was very thorough,
Mhm.
but there were a number of buildings that cited as we said last time, potential historic.
Yeah, Temple Historic Landmarks or Historic District.
Well, I.
That is another issue that I'd like to bring up with the board because we never really talked about that.
Is that something that each one of us from different districts that we're supposed to represent and say, I see this property, let's raise it as, be on the agenda, discussing it, potentially nominating it as a historic property or contributing property, however you want to phrase it,
And we,
because we're not doing that.
that would do that.
Well, we did do it.
Well,
Couple years ago.
we have had motions go forward and then do so you would just have to do a motion if you wanted to go forward with, you want staff to go forward with an application for.
We had very contentious meetings about that.
Okay, I think I remember
Super
now.
contentious, yeah.
Because people are.
Well, let's review it next time, okay?
We do have an interactive map for those sites, those
Right.
properties that have been surveyed as well, so you can view that on our website.
Okay,
To me, that was part of the point of doing the surveys. You're trying to preserve these properties. So when you
Right.
acknowledge that they exist, you want to nominate them for preservation. Otherwise,
Yeah.
what was the purpose of it?
Staff
well,
is not
Richard,
able-
before you were on the board, we tried last year, I brought before the board 10 historic mid-century buildings. We whittled it down to one after some of the applicants absolutely refused, came with all their lawyers. And the one is the Castro Building, which we're waiting, when are they coming back?
I think
Sometime
it's
soon.
scheduled for,
So.
I think it's scheduled for the middle of August. for-
Okay. Do I have a
I'll move to
motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Hallelujah. Tim seconded.